What Russian novel, embracing more than 500 characters, is set in the Napoleonic Wars?
War and Peace.
Hello everyone, welcome to AMV Books and Films. My name is April and today we're going to be going over Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. Okay, let's get this book in the frame. What? Okay, it's a behemoth of a book. It's 1,000 plus pages. It's got a ton of characters, but we're going to delve into it anyway. It's often regarded as one of the greatest novels of our time, and it is the first book in Benjamin McAvoy's Book Club 2023. It's the first book on the list. It's Russian literature, which I'm so excited about. I've never delved into Russian literature, so this will be my first time. We are going to be going over some themes and some characters. Not all the themes, not all the characters, because this book is about 1,000 plus pages. We just can't cover it all in our video for today. But we will focus on three main characters, and that is the Count Pierre Bezukhov, his best friend Prince Andrei Bolkonsky, and Natasha Rostov. So Count Pierre Bezukhov is, at the beginning of the novel, we find out he is the illegitimate son of the wealthy Count Bezukhov. He is a Russian man who went abroad to study. His father paid for that and sent him abroad to France to study. He comes back with a love of Napoleon, which is a bit awkward since there's tensions rising between Russia and France at this time. So Pierre Bezukhov, he's very socially awkward. He's naive. He's too trusting. He's a large man who kind of just wanders around and bumbles about but he has a good heart. He's got a generous soul. But you can still consider him as a protagonist of the novel, and we'll explain a little bit later as to why. Then we have Prince Andrei Bolkonsky. So he sort of represents a traditional masculinity. He's very rigid, set in his ways. He's also a wealthy man, but he could barely stand his own wife. We meet him at the beginning of the novel at the soiree, and you can just feel that he's dying inside. He doesn't want to be there. He doesn't want to be around the high society who are just sort of living this sort of silly, frivolous life and trying to make matches and there's a lot of intrigue and motives, and he just finds it all silly. He's emotionally detached, and he just wants to be a great man. He desires for something greater in life. Then there is Natasha Rostov, who we meet as a very, very young woman. At the beginning of the novel, she's about 13 years old, I believe. She's a bit narcissistic, let's be honest, a bit narcissistic, at least at the beginning of the novel. But she does undergo a massive change through some tragedies, heartbreak, and some moral missteps. She learns, she grows, and she becomes a more refined woman toward the end of the novel. Natasha sort of represents the vivacity and the life-loving Russian woman. And then towards the end of the novel, she and both Pierre sort of represent the quiet peace and the family life that Tolstoy holds so dear. So let's get to it. Set during the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon has conquered Western Europe and is getting close to invading Russia. Prince Andrei is drawn to taking up arms and defending his country. He leaves his pregnant wife to join the ranks. After the Battle of Austerlitz, Prince Andrei, and after having an epiphany on the battlefield, and upon meeting Napoleon, his once hero, and almost losing his life, he comes home to his father's house where his wife dies during childbirth. Prince Andrei returns to his nationalistic tendencies and tries to reform Russian government. He meets Natasha later on in the novel, although it is not the first time he sees her. He falls in love with her charms and asks her to marry him. His father asks Andrei to wait a year to marry her, and Prince Andrei obliges, much to the chagrin of Natasha. He goes back to the front and, through some decisions of Natasha, refuses to marry her after coming home. He goes back to war this time, becoming gravely injured, and sees Natasha one last time before he dies. We meet Pierre at a party thrown by the Bolkonskys at the beginning of the novel, along with Prince Andrei. He is genuinely happy to see Prince Andrei and vice versa. We later see Pierre and Anna Mikhailovna going to his father's house, the Count Bezukhov's mansion, where the old man lays dying. She tries to get Pierre. She's an older lady who's only looking out for her son Boris, and she realizes that if she can get Pierre to inherit his father's money, because she knows, and is no secret in the novel, that the Count Bezukov really loved Pierre, although he is illegitimate. He truly loved Pierre, and she knows this. So she tries her very best to get Pierre to accept the inheritance and to find the will that names Pierre as the inheritor. She is there to make sure that Pierre gets his just due, because she knows that the old count's will names Pierre as the benefactor, the inheritor, and as the old count truly loved Pierre. So Prince Vasily, at the same time, is also trying to get the inheritance from his father, but he sees how he can indirectly influence Pierre to get some sort of claim for his own. He succeeds by convincing a reluctant Pierre to marry his daughter Helene, who is just as fortune-hungry as her father. Once they marry, Helene becomes socially desirable and has affairs with other men. One of them in particular, Dolokhov, Pierre challenges to a duel. He shoots him but doesn't kill him. This event sends Pierre into a spiritual odyssey for the rest of the novel. He leaves his wife and joins the Freemasons, where he realizes he could use his money for the building up of that society. He eventually becomes disillusioned with the men who use Freemasonry as a means to obtain power and status and riches rather than helping and serving others. So once he becomes disillusioned, he returns to his awful wife and is in misery for most of the novel. He eventually falls in love with Natasha Rostov, who is betrothed to his friend Prince Andrei at the time. He finds himself wanting to put an end to the war with Napoleon and designs in his heart to assassinate him. He goes to the trenches, but he is not a soldier. He doesn't know how to ride a horse or to shoot a gun, and eventually becomes captured by the French himself. It is then where he endures imprisonment and witnesses executions, which deeply change him. While he is in prison, though, he meets Platon Karatev, a wise peasant who embodies life and goodness despite suffering. Platon sings to Pierre and offers advice. Platon kept Pierre alive in a symbolic sense. And it is no wonder that after being released and after healing from his illness, he gravitated toward mourning Natasha, who was grieving Prince Andrei's death at the time. They eventually marry and live a peaceful family life. Natasha is first shown as a 13-year-old girl who dances with and falls in love with Prince Boris Drubetsky, who is about to go to war. She is disappointed when he leaves, but goes about living her best life. She's joyful and youthful and spontaneous, and she loves to sing and dance. When her brother Nikolai goes on a hunting trip, she insists that she comes along. She reminds Nikolai of his love for Sonia and hopes to find her own love one day. And she does eventually. At a New Year's Eve ball, Prince Andrei has returned. He is a widower now. Her beauty and her charm completely enthrall him, and he wishes to marry her. Prince Andrei asks for her hand, but wants to defer the marriage for 1 year per his father's requests. He tells Natasha that he will be back in a year and that she is not bound to him, that she is free to find another man. And during this time, while she waits for Prince Andrei to return, it's about a year, a little over a year, she turns to... we see the narcissistic tendencies in Natasha during this time. She sees her servants and she orders them around to do just silly things, inconsequential things. She asks her brother to carry her from one room to another, and she kind of just wants to see everyone bend to her will during this time. And so we see the immaturity and the narcissistic tendencies of Natasha during this time, and we realize that she's probably not ready for marriage, and especially to Prince Andrei, who, you know, at the time were not really compatible, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. She goes off into a depression when she realizes that he's not coming home right away. One night, however, Natasha goes to an opera where she meets Pierre's wife, Helene, and her brother, Anatole. Now, Anatole makes hungry eyes at Natasha, and she becomes flustered. She all at once forgets her pure love for Prince Andrei. She allows to be charmed by this handsome man. Married man, I should say. Helene sees the attraction and tells Natasha when they have a moment alone that Anatole pines for her. A little intrigue, yes. Oh, yes. Later on, Anatole kisses Natasha and writes her a love letter. Natasha then lets everyone know that she is breaking off the engagement to Prince Andrei. Dolokhov and Anatol plan an abduction of Natasha, who would have been a willing participant had not Sonia and Count Rostov kept watch on Natasha from running away. Pierre, a friend of the Rostovs and dear friend to Prince Andrei, tells Natasha that Anatol is in fact married. Realizing her own unfaithfulness, Natasha swallows poison and becomes gravely ill. She is depressed and can no longer do the things that she used to love. She doesn't sing, she doesn't dance, she loses weight, she's bedridden. And it is also at this time that Natasha turns to Christianity and prays for forgiveness. She does slowly regain her strength and vitality, but she isn't as loud and spontaneous as she used to be. Pierre, upon one of his many visits to the Rostovs, feels that he has fallen in love with her, and so he chooses to avoid the Rostovs as much as he can, for he knows that she is engaged to his best friend, Prince Andrei. Natasha learns of Prince Andrei's rejection later on and sadly accepts it. After the Battle of Borodino and Prince Andrei becomes mortally wounded, the Rostovs care for him, even Natasha. Upon seeing Natasha, he forgives her for what had happened with Anatol. He dies, and a little later, Natasha's younger brother, Petya, dies in the war as well. Natasha has been through heartache, and when seeing Pierre again towards the end of the novel, she is gladdened. They talk as friends, but they both realize that they love each other. And they get married, have children, and at the very end of the novel, Natasha becomes a dutiful and loving wife to Pierre, and she is at peace. We see the allure of the Homeric hero and the foolishness of it. The Homeric hero is the ultra-masculine, strong, courageous, loyal, honorable. Think early Achilles in the Iliad. Prince Andrei embodies that. He strives for something noble, but there is a coldness to him. When he leaves his pregnant and sad wife to voluntarily go to war, he says to her, "Now then, go through your little performance." And she just collapses into his arms weeping, and he's just stoically patting her on the back. It's just a funny scene to behold. But Tolstoy gives Prince Andrei opportunities to realize the error of his ways. Upon meeting the one and only Homeric hero, Napoleon, his hero too, Prince Andrei's hero, and becoming injured at the Battle of Austerlitz, he realizes that so insignificant at that moment seemed to him all the interests that engrossed Napoleon and Andrei as well. So mean did his hero himself with his paltry vanity and joy in victory appear, compared to the lofty, equitable, and kindly sky which he had seen and understood. So the allure of the Homeric hero at that moment, at the Battle of Austerlitz, was shattered for Prince Andrei, at least for a while. But because Tolstoy's characters are so realistic and so well written psychologically, Prince Andrei just can't help himself. After his wife's death, he goes and he tries to reform the Russian government. He leaves his son, not really learning his lesson about leaving family, right? He left his pregnant wife to go to war, and now he's leaving his son, who have no parents now, and to go and try to reform the Russian government. He abandons his young son to try to be somebody important. And that whole theme of trying to be a hero, of trying to be a great man, is just, it kind of permeates throughout the novel and most of the characters. You see it in Nikolai, you see it in Petya, Natasha's two brothers. Unfortunately, Petya, once he goes to war, he's very young. He dies immediately. And I don't think it's a mistake that Tolstoy is trying to say that this idea of wanting to be a Homeric hero, a conquering hero, a man of victory and masculinity needs to die, or at least needs to change a little bit. We also see this allure again at the end of the novel. There is that allure of being that great man. And Prince Andrei's son, who now stays with Pierre and Natasha, one night at the very end of the novel, and it's the last thing written that of the novel, before Tolstoy goes off into his ideas of history, he writes about Prince Andrei's son, who is staying with Natasha and Pierre, and he is in bed and he has a dream. And in his dream, he sees helmets and armies, and he sees just the future glory that awaits him if he goes out and he tries to do battle, in the political sphere or on the battlefield itself. And the allure is still there, and Tolstoy realizes that allure will probably always be there. He says at the end of the novel, Prince Andrei's son. He says, Father, Father, yes, I will do something that even he would be content with. So he's talking about being the Homeric hero. He's talking about being a great man and doing battle of fighting. Although Pierre is an undisciplined, socially awkward, and naive person at the beginning of the novel, to me, he is the hero of this novel. He comes to represent a love and a kindness and eventually the peace of family life that Tolstoy holds so dear. He always wants to go, he's always in search of something, just like Prince Andrei. But they differ vastly. You know, Prince Andrei believes that the purpose of life is to help oneself. And Pierre believes that the purpose of life is to help others. And you see that thread throughout the entire novel with Pierre. He is a little sort of bumbling, awkward fellow who just kind of just doesn't know what's going on, but he has a heart of gold, and you see that throughout the entire novel. So for instance, after inheriting his father's wealth, you know, he does help out his in-laws. He does give to them. He generously gives to them, even though they despise him. He tries to help out his wife and support his wife, even though she cheats on him. And he cares for them, even though they hate him. And that is also a reflection of Christian love, which we'll talk about soon too. And also when Natasha realized her mistakes that she made with Anatole and how Prince Andrei does not want to marry her anymore, she starts to cry and weep, and instead of judging her, Pierre forgives her, and he has this compassion and love and kindness towards Natasha that is refreshing. So even as he's helping his in-laws and he's helping his wife, these dreadful people, he realizes his life is empty, and so he goes on a spiritual odyssey. He wants to join he goes and he leaves his wife to join the Freemasons and to help the betterment of mankind and of society through serving others, helping others, and he realizes he can use his money for good to develop and rebuild that society. But upon being with the Freemasons, he realizes that there is a bit of corruption there. There are men who join the Freemasons. Like he talks about the 4 types of Freemason men that join the Freemasons, or who are involved in Freemasonry, and he says that, you know, there is a large group of people who are there just to make connections, who are there to gain riches or status or power. And when he realizes this, he leaves. Also, when his mentor dies, he leaves the Freemasons. He still has that idea of wanting to help, and he sees that Russia is in danger as the French troops are invading. He wants to help, and he hatches a plan to assassinate Napoleon. So Pierre, after involving himself unwittingly in the front lines of war, he sees true horror. He sees death and he sees fear, and he still tries to save his people in Moscow. After being in prison and witnessing some executions, Pierre learns of the simplicities of life through fellow prisoner Platon Karatev. No coincidence that Platon is Russian for Plato, named after the famous Greek philosopher. Platon starkly contrasts what Pierre is going through at this time. Pierre is he's depressed after what he is going through. He's just losing all hope for life. But Platon, despite being in prison with him, he has a vivacity of life. He loves to laugh. He sings to Pierre. He gives him advice. Pierre has been through a furnace, and he truly knows what is most important in life. It's love, it's family, it's peace in the simple things of life. His help of rebuilding Moscow is sort of a flicker of his old self, but this time it's steeled with resolve and to protect the family life. Natasha also embodies this as well at the end of the novel. She has undergone a tremendous heartache and tragedy upon losing Prince Andrei. Then she loses her brother Petya and eventually her father. She has undergone such just tremendous heartache and shame, and we see her as a refined woman towards the end of the novel, at least refined in spirit. And I'm sure many feminist critics of this novel probably are angry with Natasha, or rather angry with Tolstoy for writing Natasha in this manner. She kind of loses any inclination or any desire to do what she used to do, which was to sing and to dance and to be spontaneous. But quite simply, I think she just has grown up. And it says in the novel that she thought it foolish to sort of still be that girl who's always trying to impress men and impress her husband, wear makeup all the time or do her hair or dress in a certain manner for her husband all the time. She just found that that was a sort of artificial or a shallow connection to her husband, the sort of romantic or the romantic love, that there is a much deeper connection and a deeper love, and that she realizes that marriage is really not for romance, it's actually just for the protection and for the betterment and the significance of the family. She demanded a lot from Pierre, that his whole existence should be devoted to her and the family. And he does acquiesce. She in turn devotes her whole life to her husband. And any reader could view this, and it's very easy to fall into the trap and to see this relationship as negative and not beneficial to both parties, to both Pierre and Natasha. But you can just sort of see that there is equality when they do interact. When you compare Natasha's interaction with Pierre's interaction, when you compare Natasha and Pierre's interaction with Natasha and Prince Andrei's interaction, there is a vast difference, right? When Natasha and Prince Andrei were engaged, there were many awkward silences. She always had a feeling of nervousness, anxiety, insecurity, like she felt that she probably didn't deserve Prince Andrei. She was immature, and he was very rigid and masculine and very, he was very, stuck to his ways. He was a very headstrong, proud, almost arrogant individual. And they always sometimes sat in awkward silence, even after they've gotten engaged, when they should be, just glowing in each other's presence. That wasn't always the case with Prince Andrei and Natasha. But with Pierre, there is a feeling of familiarity and closeness that she'd never had with Prince Andrei. So, and in page 1107, it says they understood each other fully, and they would often talk over each other. So just imagine a happy couple, and this is also the most realistic part. This is the realistic part of Tolstoy's writing, right? Is that he would write these characters so realistically, and he's writing a scene of Natasha and Pierre in bed. They're in bed, and she screams, or not screams, but she yells, "You're all mine now," and she's hugging him, and they're both happy that he's home from a trip that he's taken. And when they start talking, they start interrupting each other, and then they stop, and they laugh, and then they try to let one another finish their thought, and then they go on talking, and there's just a feeling of equality, of familiarity that just was non-existent with Prince Andrei and Natasha. So I feel like that their interaction kind of shows that Natasha wasn't an unhappy woman divested of her freedoms and spontaneity and her goodness. She just channeled those things into her family, and that's why she's just happy with her life. There is a moment too when Pierre, towards the end of the novel, there's some rumblings going on in the political landscape of Russia again at that time, and Pierre feels like he needs to gather good men together to sort of get Russia back on track. And Natasha sees this as sort of a gateway for Pierre in trying to become a great man, sort of like Prince Andrei and Petya and Nikolai, right? She sees the danger in that, and so she kind of says, well, what does Platon Karadov say? What would he say to you going to the capital and trying to make change? She asks him, would he approve of you going to the capital and trying to change things? And to which Pierre says, he would approve of our home life, of our happy life. There are strong themes of Christianity in this novel, and it's no wonder. Tolstoy himself, Leo Tolstoy, was a Christian, and one of the most important words for him regarding Christianity was, let us love one another in unity. And so it's no wonder that you have characters like Prince Andrei's sister, who we didn't really talk about, who is a fascinating character, Princess Myra. Also Sonia, who also represents Christian love. But it's no wonder that Prince Andrei throughout the novel has glimpses of something larger than himself and his preoccupations when he is fighting at Austerlitz, at war, and it's one of my favorite parts of the novel when he is at war, and it's almost cinematic when he's walking through the battlefield and cannons are going off around him and people are dying, and he's just sort of kind of walking through just walking through the battlefield, not really paying attention to what's happening around him, but he notices the lofty, limitless sky above him, and he realizes that all of this is just nonsense. And it says in the novel, he notices the lofty, limitless sky and how happy he was to have found it at last, and thank God. In this moment, he thinks all is vanity and achieves. There's nothing but peace and stillness, and thank God. Tolstoy's characters are just so realistic, and he just truly understood the psychology of his characters. You know, Prince Andrei has this glimpse of something that is greater than himself, beyond himself, right? That there is a sort of an eternal truth out there. He has a glimpse of it, but he reverts back to his old ways. So after his wife Liza dies, he does go back, and he tries to become that great man. He kind of pushes that one small revelation he had, he pushes it to the side, and he reverts back to his old ways. But throughout the novel, Prince Andrei does have these moments happening to him again and again, little revelations here and there. And Tolstoy, what happens with his characters is that they changed over time, very slowly throughout the entire novel. It's not just a quick change, and that is sort of how life is. You know, we're stubborn creatures. We don't learn right away. It takes quite a bit of missteps, quite a bit of errors for us to realize the important things of life, and Prince Andrei is no exception. Towards the end of the novel, when he is mortally wounded after the Battle of Borodino, and he is with the other injured soldiers in the room, and he sees Anatole. He sees Anatole, who was the rival, his rival for Natasha, and here's his chance to enact vengeance on him, to become angry and shout at him and say whatever was on his mind, whatever he wanted to do to him. He could have done, I mean, although he was injured, but instead he has compassion on him, and he sees him as another injured human being, as a brother almost, and he weeps. It's a touching moment in the novel. There's a surge of compassion that he feels towards Anatole, and it's quite a touching moment in the novel. As in, it says on page 768, he says to himself, "Sympathy, love for our brothers, for those who love us, for those who hate us, love our enemies, the love that God preached upon the earth, and I did not understand." Prince Andrei, at this moment, he realizes this love for humanity, his love for his fellow brother in Anatole, and it's a quite touching moment. This idea of Christian love is also reflected again in the scene between Prince Andrei and Natasha when he is dying, when he is mortally injured and the Rostovs are caring for him, and Natasha is also there to care for him. And she sees him, and she begins to weep and just ask for forgiveness, and he's just brimming with joy to see her, and also at the same time just feels a compassion towards her, and he forgives her. And not only does he forgive her, right, he realizes the mistakes that he made. And so it was a very touching moment in the novel. There were many moments in the novel like that just truly touched me. Another part of the novel that brought me to tears, this was one of them that brought me to tears, but there was another one also. It was when Pierre, he's in Moscow, and it was during the scene of the burning of Moscow where the French troops are coming in, and he's in search for one of the servant girls, and one of the servant girls has gone missing, and he's out in the streets trying to find her, and he goes into a building that's burning, and he rescues her, and he brings her out, and they ask him, who is this girl, and he says that she is mine, and that moment just really struck me, and it was just so heartfelt, because this is not his daughter. He has no relation to her, and she is, a poor servant girl. She is at the bottom of the social hierarchy, and he is at the very top, and he's claiming her as his own, and he's taking responsibility for her. And it's just another example of Christian love too. He just embodies goodness. I love Pierre so much, and he claims her as his own and wants to protect and wants to help and wants to care. It was just a beautiful part of the novel, and just one of those moments where you're like, this is exactly why Tolstoy is one of the greatest writers, right? Is just moments like these that truly transcend, time, and it touches us all. So yes, I truly recommend this novel. I want you, it's true that you guys have to take your time with it. It is a very long novel, and there are parts of it I didn't even touch. There are characters who I didn't even dive into. Sonia, Nikolai, Princess Myra. I didn't dive into Helene as much. I didn't dive into Platon as much. I just focused on the three main characters. There's just so many. I didn't focus in on Napoleon too much, and I didn't focus on the battles, the sequences of the battles and the whole war strategies and the colonels and all of that. So there are other YouTube channels that you can see. So like this one, for instance, is a good one, and I'll link it in the description. But those reviewers go into more detail when it comes to the historical aspect of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. But I recommend this book, so please like and subscribe, and maybe leave a comment down below of what you guys think of the novel. And I look forward to seeing you next time.